Okay, my name is Mike Ivanko. I am the VP of Marketing at Fromm Electric Supply. This summer, we are offering several webinars that are available to customers live and also on archive to learn about some of our suppliers. Specifically, we're focused on food and beverage and that industry with this set of suppliers that we're going to focus on. This supplier for today is Grace Technologies. We have Dan Kleinhenn joining us, and this webinar will be about 30 to 45 minutes in length. We will have additional webinars in June, July, and August, including suppliers like Rockwell Automation, Hubble Wiring Devices, and ABB. But today, we're going to focus on Grace Technologies and the things that they can do to help make your maintenance safer, smarter, and more productive. So I'm going to hand things over to Dan Kleinhenn, our speaker. And if you have questions during this time, please feel free to type them in the chat and we will address them at the end of Dan's presentation. So Dan, if you want to go ahead and get started, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Mike. Yeah, so today, just to cover the three main product groups from Grace Technologies, starting with the GracePorts panel interface devices, the permanent electrical safety devices, PESDs, and then their predictive maintenance, their condition-based monitoring devices from the GraceSense product group. As I mentioned, those three groups and kind of the focus behind each of those product groups, enhancing productivity, making industrial control panels safer, the permanent electrical safety devices providing safer, more productive means of electrical lockout tagout, and making the job tasks of qualified electrical workers more efficient. And then finally, the GraceSense predictive maintenance system, helping you identify potential equipment issues before they happen, preventing unplanned downtime, and improving overall plant reliability. Just a quick overview of Grace as a company, founded in 1991 by Phil Allen. Even though they're a pretty common type device these days, the idea of a GracePort was actually invented by Phil Allen back in the early 90s, providing you with a means of interfacing with control devices, with equipment inside of a panel without having to open or potentially expose yourself to hazardous voltage. They've been a Rockwell partner for over 25 years. They do monthly webinars, have an incredibly active YouTube page with a lot of very, very well done informational webinars, and they have a global distribution network. As Mike mentioned, the whole focus that Grace has as a company is about making maintenance safer, smarter, and more productive. So the first main product group, the product that I think many people, if they're familiar at all with Grace, is the GracePort, and the broad range of different configurations and options that they provide with that product group. So the whole idea, as is the case with all three of their main product groups, is keeping employees out of critical cabinets, allowing them to do their job without exposing themselves to hazardous voltage. With the GracePort being more focused on the control side of things, it typically is about keeping unauthorized or non-qualified electrical workers out of potentially dangerous cabinets. This will come up a couple times in the presentation today, but if you've seen it before, either in NFPA 70 training or in other safety-related webinars, the hierarchy of controls, the different methods for keeping your workers safe, as far as being the easiest to implement but the least effective, PPE, and then the most effective but typically the most difficult to implement, eliminating the hazard altogether. And many of these Grace products that I'm going to talk about today are really focused on eliminating, or at the very least, substituting the hazard. And through that, we're not only increasing safety, we're making workers' jobs a lot more efficient, increasing productivity, and then also from a company standpoint, helping you be more compliant, helping your overall electrical safety program. So as just a broad overview, the GracePort, kind of the original idea of this type of device is fully customizable. From a broad perspective, pretty much any connector, cable, or power option that you need to be able to interface with whatever equipment you have inside of a control cabinet or other electrical piece of equipment, you tell us what those things are. We can very quickly configure a part number for you. You tell us the type of environment it's going to be in. That helps us know what kind of enclosure it has to be in. And then we'll build and ship that within 2 to 3 days. Beyond that, Grace has their more popular, more common, top 10 configurations. Those will ship same day. We're up over 20,000 different unique part numbers and growing. And, being a small company, but with such a long history of this product, pretty much there's no configuration they can't do. So regardless of how unique your specific need is, they can put it together and make it work for your application. And just because of, how quickly this enables workers to interface with equipment without having to open the door, without having to establish a safe work condition, we typically see a payback within one programming session. A big thing that Grace does that not many other companies do is the personalization side of things. So beyond just the fact that we can configure the GracePort itself to whatever you need, we can also put your specific company logo or any other custom text on the face of that GracePort, and that's a no-cost adder. And it typically does not add any lead time as well. In addition to all the different sizes we offer for the different GracePort configurations you might need, we also have all the different UL types, depending on the environment it's going to go into. So 4X, especially for corrosive environments, or anything that's going to be exposed to chemicals that might impact, type 4 or type 12 housing. And we also have a 304 and 316 stainless steel GracePort housings. The new MagView GracePort, which I'll cover in a separate slide, also provides some additional protections beyond even just what we have in our traditional configurations. Just a quick snapshot of basically how the GracePort part number is configured. It's the housing size and the UL rating, the power options if you need any, the components, and then if you want any kind of customization as far as what's actually displayed on the front of the GracePort. And like I said, that customization as far as phone number, logo, specific verbiage on there for your employees to indicate what they're supposed to do, a scannable QR code to take them to documentation they might need, does not add any cost to the price of the GracePort. The new MagView has a magnetic cover, so unlike the more traditional flip latch that we've always had, is now a completely magnetic latching cover. Also, if you do not have if it's not a stainless steel enclosure that the GracePort is mounted on, it also snaps open, and holds that lid open against the enclosure. The big thing though with the MagView GracePort is it's IP69K rated, so completely dust proof and rated to withstand high pressure, high temperature washdown. It is also, unlike the other GracePorts that you choose the specific UL rating for the housing you want, it carries all of the UL ratings and is UL listed, not UL recognized. So for instances where you don't want to have to go through the process of getting a UL listing on your enclosure after installing something, if that is a requirement for you, this is actually a UL listed product. And just like any of our clear cover devices that Grace offers, there are UV inhibitors. So if it ever was in an outdoor application, we're providing additional protection for whatever's underneath that cover. For any installation locations or applications where the connector might actually be subjected to submerged water or standing water. They do have single connector IP68 rated GracePorts. So this is where they're actually rated for complete submersion for an extended period of time. So if you just need a single RJ45 or USB connector, we do offer that in an IP68 form factor. In addition to that IP69K rated MagView, as I mentioned earlier, we also have the 304, 316 stainless steel enclosures, the 316 having that very high level of enhanced corrosion resistance. The M5 and M6 housing you see on the left there, those actually provide you with some additional room within the housing itself. So if you do have a panel that you don't have a ton of space in, that can actually accommodate some additional component wiring in the GracePort itself. The JB7 housing on the right there provides more of a slimline, low profile housing for tighter insulation locations with a quarter turn latch. The final kind of product within the GracePort product group is the GracePort Plus. This is really, it's an HMI cover, but can also be customized and populated just like your traditional GracePort. Just like any of our clear cover devices, there's heavy amounts of UV inhibitors in the cover. So we very frequently see these used in outdoor applications to protect the HMI that's in there, but also any other components that are underneath that cover. It's a very, very easy retrofit. So especially if you have an HMI out there that's been installed for a while, we typically see those gaskets, wear over time. You might start to have dust or liquid ingress into your panel. This is really meant to add that additional level of protection. Beyond that, it also provides that extra level of protection for washdown, stainless steel hardware, and it is padlockable. We have 5 standard sizes. The 20 by 16 can accommodate a Panel V Plus 7 15-inch widescreen if you're using an Allen Bradley HMI. And there's the UL types that we offer and the GracePort Plus. So it can be ordered as just a cover that is just easily installed right over whatever existing HMI or other devices you have. Or as you can see in the photo, we can populate it with whatever connectors and power options you want. And then we'll actually provide it pre-cut out for whatever specific HMI you have. So you just give us the part number of the HMI that you're planning to install this over, and Grace will provide the proper cutout and installation instructions so this can fit right over top of that. The second main product group from Grace is the permanent electrical safety devices. As I mentioned before, with that hierarchy of risk control, really focused on, elimination or substitution of the risk, not just separating the worker from or providing, protection from the hazard, but actually just completely removing them from any kind of potential electrical hazard with these products. So the whole idea here with the permanent electrical safety devices, we see the most common reasons for personnel being affected by hazardous energy, the most common reasons for electrical injuries in facilities, for shock, for arc flash incidents is, failure to follow lockout tagout procedures, improperly installed or damaged equipment, human error in training, and then most commonly unexpected release of stored energy or a failed isolator or one or more phases. And that meaning, you throw a disconnect, you think you've isolated power, and you go to open up that cabinet and something's still alive. You have a stuck blade, or there's some other failure in that piece of equipment where you thought you isolated power, but there's no way for you to actually know that there's nothing dangerous within that cabinet until you've opened it up. And without a device like a permanent electrical safety device, you would have to go in with your meter and confirm absence of voltage, and by the NFPA 70E 120.6 actually establish that safe work condition and confirm that it is safe to do your work in that cabinet and that it is properly de-energized. So the first part of the PESD group from Grace is the voltage indicators. And these are really for the presence of voltage indication. So these can be used for troubleshooting, giving you indication that there is voltage present on all three phases, or for two-phase applications or single-phase applications. For troubleshooting, you shouldn't see indication on the ground side, but if you have a ground fault or other issue, you'll start to see lights there. That'll give you that indication. We make them for class 1 div 2 options. So if you do have a hazardous location or a location that there's combustible dust, flour, anything like that, we do make voltage indicators that are rated for installation in those types of locations. We also have customers who use these for mechanical lockout tagout. So you're isolating energy, you're isolating power, but you're not actually opening up an electrical cabinet, but you do want confirmation, or at least a second level confirmation, that power has been properly isolated. So you're going in a tool change, or you're entering into a protected area. Once again, you've turned power off. This is giving you indication on the outside of your enclosure that power has been properly isolated. You don't have a stuck blade. And when you threw that disconnect or turn power off, that you see the lights go out, you know that power has been properly isolated. If there's any equipment like AC drives or any inductive load that might have residual energy, that there should be some amount of time that has to go by for that energy to bleed off before you can safely interact with equipment. Another thing here, you've turned power off and you can see the lights slowly go out. And then once they've turned off, you know that it's safe to interact with that piece of equipment from a mechanical side. From the electrical lockout tagout side, the next product is the safe test point. And this is where you're actually able to do the verification of absence of voltage, actually establish a safe working condition and be compliant with NFPA 70E 120.6 and establish that safe working condition, verify absence of voltage, confirm there's no hazardous energy in that electrical enclosure before you interact with it. So not only is this keeping workers safer by not having them open up a piece of equipment that could still potentially be energized, even when they go to do their test, but it's also significantly speeding up that whole entire process. In 2018, NFPA 70B, which is kind of part of the maintenance side of electrical equipment, really emphasized or started to emphasize the idea of a normal operating condition. And then in the 2021 update is when they actually codified it. So it is now actually a requirement to establish the operating condition of a piece of equipment. And that includes like there's no damage, the cover is properly installed, a visual inspection has been completed within the last 12 months in order for you to determine, is this piece of equipment likely to cause an arc flash incident if I interact with it? And another big thing that people need to be aware of is if a piece of equipment is not considered to be in a normal operating condition, that NFPA 70B, which then flows into NFPA 70E, actually considers the act of opening the door, opening up an electrical enclosure, and an action that is likely to cause an arc flash incident. And as a result, you're, by the standard, supposed to be wearing your properly rated PPE unless you've already been able to establish a safe working condition. So in addition to your day-to-day normal task of verifying absence of voltage, devices like the safe test point enable you to do that from outside of the cabinet and completely remove that scenario in which you might be exposing yourself to hazardous voltage because there's been some failure of your isolating device, like a disconnect. The voltage test station is just a combination of those two devices I just talked about, the indicator and the safe test point, into a single housing, just like the GracePort. So it's giving you the presence of voltage indication. So before you even go up to do your test, you can see if the equipment's still energized. You throw your disconnect, you see the lights go out. You can then do your live dead live or your phase to phase, phase to ground check to establish that safe work condition. And just like our GracePorts, you can configure this with 2 indicators for line and load mechanical lockout tagout. You could configure it with 2 safe test points for line and load electrical lockout tagout. And we also make, 5-wire options if, part of your company policy is to also test the neutral, or if you're just using it for a troubleshooting application. And just like the GracePort, this can be populated into a stainless steel housing. If you do have it in an environment where there's high levels of corrosion or solvents where you need that added layer of corrosion resistance and protection. The check bolt is kind of the newest addition to that family of permanent electrical safety devices. This is combining the indicator and the safe test point into a single compact 30mm device. And on top of that, it's both 4X rated and IP69 rated. So it's rated for that 80 degrees Celsius, 1450 PSI, high pressure, high temperature washdown, that is a requirement in certain areas of the food industry. It's touch safe rated and also rated for up to 1,000 volts AC or DC. So this would be installed, the leads of the check volt will be installed at your point of work, or at the same exact location that you would be verifying absence of voltage inside your piece of equipment if you did not have a device like this. And it lets you do that same, establishing and verification of electrical safe work condition outside of the cabinet. And plus gives you that indication. So even from a safety or management perspective, even if you're not the one doing the work, standing back or, from a distance, you can see, okay, my worker is interacting with that piece of equipment and I see lights flashing, they should be geared up because that equipment is still energized. Just outlining, the process for establishing a safe work condition and the fact that the check volt and the safe test point, just like the check volt, meets that standard and allows you to follow that same process just as if you were doing it inside the piece of equipment. But this lets you do it outside and never expose yourself to potentially dangerous voltages. In the 2024 update to the NFPA 70E, they introduced the concept of point of work. And this was kind of a new idea where the location where the task is performed is where you need to establish absence of voltage. So, in the past, if you had a large electrical cabinet and then the disconnect, the main disconnect for that cabinet was, maybe 2 feet away, connected by some conduit. And in the past, without a PESD or a device like it, you'd throw that disconnect, your worker would actually open up typically that disconnect and check for 0 volts on the fuse side of that disconnect, because that's what's feeding the cabinet that they're planning to go into. The whole idea of point of work that the NFPA 70E introduced is that you need to verify absence of voltage in the piece of equipment that you're going to be working on. So in the scenario I just described, what you would do is, turn off that disconnect and then actually open up that cabinet that you're planning to work in and verify absence of voltage there. And the only thing that makes it important to clarify when you're looking at installation of PESDs is just making sure that the leads of the PESD, the check volt, the safe test point, the voltage test station, that they're installed at the same location, the same point of work that you would be otherwise testing if you didn't have it. So in the case of that electrical enclosure, you would install those leads, per the operating instructions inside that cabinet at the point of work so that that you're following, the NFPA 70 guidelines for establishing a safe work condition. If your area that you were planning to verify absence of voltage was the disconnect, then that would actually be a separate unit. You would have the leads landed there. And that's really all the point of work is emphasizing, is making sure that you're not just verifying absence of voltage of whatever the thing was you used to turn off power to that piece of equipment. You're actually confirming that there's no secondary feed to that piece of equipment. There's no additional energy coming in here from somewhere else. So of course, if you had a piece of equipment with multiple feeds, which happens sometimes, you would need to verify absence of voltage at both feeds to that cabinet that you're planning to work on. The third product group from Grace is the GraceSense Predictive Maintenance and Condition Monitoring System. The first one is the hotspot monitor, which is focused on continuous temperature monitoring. And the idea here is, for any company that is, as part of their preventative maintenance program, as far as their electrical safety program, is doing IR scanning, for instance, looking for potential hotspots, indicating loose connections in critical gear. The idea of the hotspot monitor is to have continuous temperature monitoring in your critical gear, your medium, your high voltage gear that is either not getting scanned very frequently, or as you can see in this image here, even with a window, or even if you could safely open up that piece of gear to take your IR scans, there's a lot of areas within that piece of equipment that could be potential hotspots, potential loose connections that could eventually lead to an arc flash incident or failure of the equipment that you're not going to be able to see or be aware of were it not for a device like the hotspot monitor. So it's non-conductive, continuous temperature monitoring. You're able to land the temperature probes directly on equipment up to 80,000 volts, and it's completely isolated from the monitoring module itself. And that module, in addition to its own data logging, has both Ethernet IP and Modbus TCP IP to let you share that information, to a local screen, look at it on your laptop, put it onto your SCADA, or anything else you want to do with it. So as I mentioned, the whole idea is you keep your equipment closed, you're keeping your workers away from live voltage, really focusing on the critical assets, your larger gear. You don't have to interrupt any kind of production or process in order to get continuous temperature monitoring of your gear, and it's continuous. You can reach inaccessible locations, you're lowering the risk, and it's really focused on that medium to high voltage equipment that you either can't open up safely because, say, the arc flash value would be too high, so there's no gear you could wear and safely open it up properly. Or if you have an IR window installed, you're really only getting a small snapshot of potential areas within that larger gear that could be issues. Kind of reiterating that image I showed earlier of all the spots that could be missed without a device like the hotspot monitor, where you can route those probes throughout the equipment and actually see every single spot at which a potential hotspot could develop. And as I mentioned, these are polymer probes. They're completely isolated from the monitoring module itself. They don't affect your dielectrics, so there's no calculations that have to be done. They don't affect your SCCRs or anything like that for larger gear. And you can mount them on equipment up to 80,000 volts. The modules themselves can also be daisy chained, so you just have a single Ethernet IP connection going back to whatever your monitoring controller is. In addition to being able to take that memory or take that information, out to an external device, they do have onboard memory. They're able to store roughly 15 years of data on board. They also have a changeover contact, so even right on the hotspot monitor itself, if you wanted to set an alarm there and have it trigger, an audible alarm or light or turn off a piece of equipment based on a temperature threshold being passed, you can do that right from the hotspot monitor without even tying it into a higher level controller. We do have accessories for it as well, such as an ambient temperature probe. There is also a current sensor, so you can look at the current on a piece of equipment compared to the temperature and look at both of those as you're doing your condition-based monitoring of that electrical gear. Just a graphic on how the technology behind this product works. As I mentioned, it's a polymer fiber that's actually connected to the lug that you would mount at each location that you want to monitor temperature at. There's actually light being emitted out of the hotspot monitor module. It's bouncing off this little phosphorus probe at the end. And then there's an algorithm in the hotspot monitor that's looking at that attenuation and determining the temperature. And that's what, enables that complete electrical isolation between the temperature probe and the monitoring module itself. So that yellow hotspot monitor goes in your control cabinet, and the probe, as I said, can go on equipment up to 80,000 volts. As part of the GraceSense, predictive maintenance condition monitoring family, we also have vibration and temperature monitoring devices. Kind of a graphic of how these all work together. We have our hotspot monitor I just talked about. We have wireless vibration and temperature monitoring nodes that would go on any rotating equipment, motors, pumps, compressors, and those transmit wirelessly back to what we call our cloud gate. And these modules share that information from the hotspot monitor, from our vibration nodes, any other wired sensors you have out in the field. And they can share that locally to your SCADA or to a PLC over Ethernet IP or Modbus. They can also share it to the cloud, to our maintenance hub, to our condition monitoring system over Wi-Fi or 4G LTE. So our vibration and temperature nodes are triaxial magnetic mount. You put them right on your rotating equipment. They have replaceable off-the-shelf batteries. The new VBTX is actually IP69K rated, so it is rated for high pressure, high temperature washdown. It will also eventually carry a hazardous location rating. So for EX locations, combustible gases, liquids, or dust. And we offer a variety of mounting options. So, for any company that's doing any sort of vibration monitoring at this point, either with a handheld unit or having a third party come in to do some vibration analysis on their equipment, the GraceSense vibration system provides a very, very nice way to kind of take control of your own vibration and condition monitoring system. Very easy to install, very easy to expand and grow into a larger system, and it's very, very cost effective. You don't have to do this facility-wide installation. You can focus on just critical assets and then expand out to whatever equipment actually is important for you to monitor and catch potential machine failures well before they happen. Because they're wireless, it really cuts down on the integration costs. It's kind of plug and play. You mount them on your equipment and you're up and running. And you can either tie it back into your local system or immediately have access to all the analytics and vibration and temperature data from the cloud on your mobile device or on your computer. And then those panel mount cloud gates, as we call them, that are collecting the data from those field mount nodes. Those, like I said, can share that data wirelessly over Wi-Fi or 4G, so there's no need to interact with the plant system whatsoever. They can be completely separate, isolated, and just be strictly responsible for monitoring any of that sensor data that they're pulling in. And on top of that, they can configure for wired sensors as well. So if you have existing sensors out there, 0 to 10 volt, 420 milliamp, any other sensor type, you want to also pull those into the cloud gate so that you can view them remotely, set up text message and or email alerts and alarms, do all that trending through the maintenance hub. It makes it very, very easy to do that. That was a broad overview of everything that Grace had. Tried to really kind of highlight, specific products that either carry the IP69K, the 4X rating stainless steel that, especially for washdown environments or just, corrosive environments, anywhere where that added level of protection is especially needed. But, the big thing about Grace is they provide, tremendous amount of customization and flexibility for their panel interface devices, their electrical safety devices, and then their predictive maintenance and condition-based monitoring devices. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take those now.
All right, Dan, I appreciate you running through that presentation. I didn't see any questions in the Q&A. To anyone that listens to this, please feel free to reach out to Dan utilizing the email on the screen right now or his phone. All of this technology that Dan covered today is available through Fromm as an electrical distributor and a services provider. And we'd be happy to talk more to you about it. We can be reached through sales@frommelectric.com or at 1-800-360-4441. Or you could reach out to your local sales associate and they can answer questions as well. So Dan, I appreciate your time today. Thanks again for highlighting the GracePort, the PESDs, and the GraceSense products. And we'll look forward to more things from Grace.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.